washed glass, because in the past it caused so many problems. It was breakage on the line because there were slightly different sizes. So we kept going back to packaging. We had no idea how to get there, how to get to this big system, until we started asking these questions and realized that we had to have a bottle that we wanted. So we went to Owens, Illinois, the largest manufacturer of glass in the world, at least of bottles and jars. So this little pre-revenue startup company walked into a meeting with some folks. It took us about 6 months before we even got connected with someone. They kept filtering us back to their local sales rep who didn't care whatsoever. We weren't a big brand. They didn't care about us. But we got the right person who worked in the beer space before, and she had helped work on a refillable beer bottle program, and she loved it. She took us in, she brought us under, connected us with the right people, the sustainability teams, the global sustainability team at OI, and we started saying, okay, let's design a refillable wine bottle for the industry. Let's start standardizing around a bottle that we actually can collect and reuse. So we ended up, I'm gonna scoot forward to our bottle. So we ended up going to about 70 wineries, getting input, because they don't want anything. They want their brand, they want their label on the shelf. And you're competing with that, with something that is identifiable, that is sortable by computer technology, that has a lot of features on it that you can use and tell customers. You get to sell this bottle. Customers can start to pick sustainable on the shelf. And that's part of the story we're telling. We're telling them that these beautiful wines that they put so much thought and effort into in the vineyards, and how they water, how they irrigate, how they treat their employees, how minimal they touch it, and it's these precious little things. But at the end of the day, they're putting their wines in the same packaging that the mass producers of wine are using, the same glass bottles. So this is a way that we can actually distinguish, like, you're choosing sustainable packaging. You're choosing the best option on the shelf. Because if you look at pure carbon emissions, single-use glass is the worst package you can have. It is heavy, it breaks, it's hard to ship, and then there's no recycling at the end of the day. Only about 9 to 30% of glass in this country gets recycled at all. So we went to the wineries, designed this. We had to get the European OI team. They don't talk to each other at these big corporations sometimes. They had no idea that they did refillable packaging in Germany, in Europe. So we had to say, like, look, your people do this. And we got their people in Europe to talk to their people here and say, this is possible. This is all possible. We don't need to worry about the legal ramifications. We don't need to worry about these bottles being able to withstand uses. Because they don't even spec their stuff. They wash it, they use it again. But we're in a system where this hasn't been proven. It's not trusted here. So let's go back to our mission. So we really started defining that pretty early on. We are reviving the refillable glass bottle ecosystem, and that is however we need to do it, is what we're doing. And that grew from just us saying we'll ship bottles to our little local brands that support us in Oregon, to shifting all the way to we need to sell a refillable bottle to any brand in the country that wants it, because it's a better option and it allows anyone else to collect it and start looking at reuse and start looking at how the logistics of collecting bottles back to a centralized facility actually work out. So big shift from where we started, but networking. Talking about PR, we launched a PR just in August last year. It took us about 1.5 years of working in the background, developing with wineries, to actually feel like we had a program we could start talking to the consumers about and start getting engagement on, and have at the table when we launched a bunch of wineries on board to start spreading that same message. So pretty much immediately, we hired someone who just part-time hangs out with us, does PR work, and just got published in all sorts of things. And the contacts started rolling in. We have been approached by every single glass distributor in the country. We were approached by the 3rd largest glass manufacturer in the country for investment. And that's wild space to be for a pre-revenue startup. We are very sought after. And it's because of all this networking. It's because of all this engagement we did before we even went out to the public to start saying, look for our bottles, buy our bottles, right? Because anyone can do this. It's a low barrier. You basically need a dishwasher, and you need time and commitment. But to actually start looking at a scalable option, there's a whole lot more backstory that comes to it. There's a whole bunch more research that you needed to get into that space. So let's skip over this. So the fun part has been engaging with people globally. The wine space has not been doing refillable bottles for the most part for a while. There's been pilot projects all over the world. South Africa, there's one company that has washed 68 million bottles in 2018 alone. But we don't even hear about that, right? Because they're just doing it. It's such a way of life in a lot of other spaces. But there's a lot of traction on this front. So in France, they put a mandate in for how much packaging needs to be reused. That went from 2% to 10%. In Italy, where our manufacturers are of the wash equipment, we walked over to them, and there's been people doing this since 2004, and you'll never hear about them once. But we actually got to engage with them by starting to show up and starting to ask these questions, like, how do you get your bottles back? How do you, what's the problems that you have? We added some new equipment into our line because we wouldn't have thought about it. No one told us, but these two brothers who just operate a tiny winery in Italy happened to have a bottle washer, and they were like, you need a water softener. So we're like, okay, great, we need a water softener. And that solved one of the problems that these people in California had, which is this haze that developed on the bottles. And they never did enough research to figure out what that was. But we just happened to ask these people in Italy, and they were like, just water softener, do it. And had 16 shots of espresso with them, because that's what you do over there. And these targets are changing a lot. Germany, they're putting a 45% mandate in. And that's from a space where wine was not required to do refillable bottles at all before. Just beer and soda were. And now, next year, they have to start looking at how to meet emissions targets. So in the wine space, this is a huge market. I'm gonna skip over a lot of this because we don't have a whole lot of time. But we had to put together the entire background. Like, how do you get these bottles back? How do you, meet enough partners throughout the country that can start to think about collecting bottles that get shipped from Oregon, go to Chicago or New York, and maybe up in New York wine country. Are there people engaged in this up there? How can we start to develop a huge network of people to start doing something that has never been done in the US for 60 years? And that's been an incredible journey. We just last week got word from the largest glass manufacturer in the world that they are fully behind us now, supporting us with new molds, hundreds of thousands of dollars in distribution support. We basically came to them with this idea, and now we get to rely on them to do what they do best. And then on the other side, there's people taking back those like ice packs from the meal kits that you get at home. And we met with them a few weeks ago, and they're like, we can do this now. Like, we're collecting back ice packs and reusing them. We can easily add wine bottles to our list. So we get to start thinking through these processes where we were just stuck in Little Oregon, a pretty small market compared to the US. When we had these companies in California that ship 80,000 cases out to the rest of the country, they want to participate, but they don't want to participate until they could collect their bottles back, which is sort of a catch-22, right? You can't expect to have enough support and enough bottles out in a state like Kansas without the participation of those big brands. So we shifted our model entirely to start saying, each bottle that is a refillable bottle out there that starts out at a place where it can be collected, it can be reused, is an opportunity to reuse, right? Whereas before we were approaching it as, use our bottles for the spaces that can be reused. And now we can start to say, these bottles are a better option to start with, use them everywhere. And the people that are working on all the hard work, which is collecting and bringing them back to a centralized place for us to wash them, can just partner with us or start hopping on board. And we start giving them revenue, and we start building this reuse economy, which is really coming at a pretty quick clip. But it's going to be a really big hurdle to get to. So I still want to leave time. I left out a whole bunch of what I talked about in the first class, but I want to leave a few minutes to answer questions. Partnerships, critical, I will say that. But yeah, any questions?